Hi folks, this lesson is a continuation of the preceding one that focused on the social construction of reality. In my estimation, a good way of illustrating the significance of the social construction of reality is to highlight again what are sometimes referred to as urban legends. That phrase entered into popular everyday speech or lexicon in the 1980s when a folklorist by the name of Jan Brunnenvand, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, published what is thought to be the first book on the subject, The Vanishing Hitchhiker. And on page 13 and 14 of your second study guide, there is some information about urban legends. That's more or less a working definition, if you will. Some folks have wondered why the terminology urban legend. Well, some have suggested this is a way of separating contemporary stories or legends or myths from those of earlier eras, if you wish. Now, one of the things I wanted to highlight is, and you don't have this in your study guide, but focus on it if you will. These are, again, some of the major characteristic elements of urban legends. Remember, this is a story. It's usually more or less of a spontaneous origin. In other words, if you try to pin people down, where'd this come from, when did it start, it would be rather hard for them to do. Likewise, it's alleged to be true, but more often than not, it doesn't have a verifiable basis. And there's a plausibility factor that's involved in urban legends. As I've noted over on the next page of the study guide, one of the reasons why a lot of people buy into urban legends, really accept them, is they can say, gosh, that could happen. I could be there. Okay. On the other hand, they're likely to be attributed to some kind of trustworthy, although second-hand source. More often than not, these are stories that are passed along by word of mouth. Well, they come from a friend who had a friend who had a friend who had a friend who had a friend. They've got to be right. Okay? But the interesting thing is, whether people buy into them has a great deal to do with the storytelling capabilities of the person who's sharing the story. So this is again something that's passed on from individual to individual. I don't want to leave the impression only orally or by word of mouth. It can be passed on in writing as well. But what's interesting is that being passed on from one person to the other, these urban legends change as they are told. And also, what you want to remember, and this may be in many respects one of the most significant aspects about urban legends, they involve a moral, if you wish. Think of them as cautionary tales to a great extent. Okay? And sometimes they may have an element of truth associated with them. But more often than not, if they do, it's blown totally out of proportion. One of the earliest I ever heard was referred to as the hook. And it involved a young teenage couple driving out into the countryside and what used to be called parking. And that was followed by them, quote unquote, making out. Well, in the story, the version I was told, the young man wanted to do more than just, again, make out with his girlfriend. He wanted to do the wild thing, to go, quote unquote, all the way. And so he's stopped and parked the car in a secluded area. He's turned on the radio, listening to his favorite tunes, and hoping to get her in the mood. Now, about halfway through the process, when they're intently making out, right in the middle of their favorite song comes an emergency announcement. a crazed killer from the nearby prison for the criminally insane has escaped. He's nondescript, but he's missing one hand. In place, there's a hook. Well, the young woman becomes increasingly agitated, concerned, and fearful. And she tells her boyfriend, "Look, he could be hiding right out there in the bushes, ready to kill us. Please take me home." Well, the young man, again trying to go, quote unquote, all the way, continues to try to make out. But she is resolute, and she demands that she be taken home. He finally agrees, turns on the car, puts it into gear, tries to drive away, and the wheels start spinning. Well, the young woman begins to really panic at this point. And he says, calm down. There's some sand. I noticed it when we came in. I'll have to gun the car. So he really guns it. He squeals out onto the highway, and he drives her home. And in the version I was told, as they're driving home, she makes this comment, "What's that sound?" And he said, "I don't know. Maybe I did a jackrabbit start back there. Maybe, again, I dislodged something. I'll check it when I get you home." And in the version I was told, he was a considerate young man. So he walks around to open the door, and guess what's dangling from the door handle? A hook. Now, what's the moral? Well, if you're really a good young man and woman, you won't be out fooling around. Plus, carried with it in this tale is the fact that automobiles have given youngsters a great deal of freedom. Maybe some of you have heard of the various versions of the quote-unquote hippie babysitter. The version I was told is of a young, upwardly mobile couple who go to a party and they go through a service and get a babysitter because they really want to go to this party. And she's a young woman. In a few cases in the story is told, it could be a young man. Okay, somewhat wide-eyed. But again, the couple don't think too much about it. They go to the party, and after spending a couple of hours, the mother comes and says, "Call and see how the baby's doing." Okay, so the father calls, and again, the babysitter says, "Everything's fine, baby's doing well. By the way, tell your wife I put the turkey in the oven." Well, the husband stops for just a moment. "Turkey? I don't remember a turkey." But then he hangs up and says, "Okay, we'll see you in a bit." And he goes and tells his wife. His wife suddenly said, "Wait a minute. I didn't put out a turkey. What's going on?" They rush home. What do they discover? Well, a high babysitter who has placed the baby in the oven. What's the moral there? Well, if you're good parents, you'll stay home and take care of your kid. And something else that I heard. And more often than not, although it shows up in this illustration as a man, in almost every version I've ever heard, it's a woman. The version that I'm most familiar with is the woman who, she's married. Every evening her husband expects her to have a meal prepared for him. So she decides, I'm going to stand my ground tonight and have him take me out. So he comes home and he says, "Well, what are we having for dinner?" And the wife responds, "Well, nothing. You're going to take me out. Every night I prepare you a great meal. Now you're going to treat me to one." Now, in the version I was told, he was somewhat of a cheapskate. So where does he take her? To Kentucky Fried Chicken. And in the version I was told, he's too lazy to go even inside, so they go through the drive-thru. Okay? She orders extra crispy. And he pulls off into the parking lot. And in the version I was told, it was in the evening, and just happens that the light nearby isn't working as efficiently as it should. So she pulls out a piece of extra crispy, takes a bite, and she tells her husband, "Well, it doesn't taste right." Now, he at this point gets rather upset, says, "Look, you wanted me to take you out, so just eat your meal." So she takes a few more bites, and again, something's wrong, she says. "Turn on the dome light." So he does, and she's eaten half of a batter fried rat. What's the moral? Have you picked up on it? Well, if she was a good wife, what would she be doing? She'd be home taking care of her husband's needs. Now, you most likely have heard other versions of these so-called urban legends, and all of them are fascinating. One of my favorites are the three guys who are in college. They go for a ski vacation. It's all right. They're getting ready to head back Sunday afternoon when they hear about a new front coming through that's going to dump a lot of powder Sunday night, and Monday is going to be the most fabulous day of the whole skiing season. So they concoct this idea, even though they've got a major exam scheduled in their college class. They decide, well, let's call the prof and see, we'll come up with some kind of excuse and see if we can take the exam later. Well, they do that. They concoct the story that, well, on our way down from the ski lodge, we hit a rock, destroyed one of the wheels on the car. The damage was so significant they have to bring up a whole new wheel unit, and we're not going to be able to get back on campus until probably late Monday. So they call the prof, tell him the story. He buys into it and says, sure, just come in Tuesday morning and I'll set you all up with a makeup exam. So they feel very good. They go out, they ski, they have a wonderful time. They get back on campus late Monday night. Tuesday morning, they show up in the prof's office at 8 o'clock. In the version I was told, he puts them all in separate classrooms. So they open up the test booklet, and the first question is fairly simple. What's the definition of sociology? So they write out the definition thinking this is going to be a breeze. So they open to the second page, and the second question, worth 95 points out of 100. The first question was only worth 5 points. That question is very simply this: which wheel? Do you catch the moral lesson there? So if you look at the top of page 14 in your study guide, there are some reasons why we tend to buy into urban legends. Remember, these aren't only told, they're meant to be believed. Do you pick up on them? One other I might share with you. You ever heard this one? Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights? The version I was told, it's a co-ed. Her roommate is a very studious type. Well, this co-ed again is going to spend the evening with her boyfriend in his apartment. She knows her roommate goes to bed early, so she tells her, look, I won't be in that afternoon, she tells her. I won't be in until tomorrow morning. I'm going to spend the evening with my boyfriend. She goes to her boyfriend's apartment. They have a nice meal. They're preparing to have a wild and crazy night of sex when she realizes she left something back in the room. It's roughly 10 o'clock. She goes back and she decides, I'm not going to switch on the light and wake up my roommate. So she stumbles around, gets what she needs, and exits. The next morning she comes back. There are policemen all over the place. And there's yellow tape indicating that some kind of serious crime or offense has taken place. An officer approaches her, a police officer approaches her, and as she's trying to enter into the dorm, and she explains, well, I live here, and when he finds out what room she occupies, she said, let me get my commanding officer. The commanding officer comes over, and she tells the young woman, I'm sorry, your roommate was murdered last night. In terrible shock, the young woman falls back as she begins to cry. And the commanding officer says, could you help us? The murderer left a message. I'm sorry, written in your roommate's blood. Can you help us to determine the meaning? The young woman tries to, in some form or fashion, control her emotions, and she says, yes, I will try. They go to the room, walk into the bathroom area, and there written in the blood of her slaughtered roommate is the statement, aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights? Now think about the moral lesson there. Aren't some parents a little bit worried as their children move away from home, go off to school, go off to work? So, in a lot of ways, urban legends reflect those components of modern life that some of us find uncomfortable. Until next time.